So-called black people's dominance was so strong in Europe that many of our people reigned as kings and queens. This took place from the 700s all the way to the 1600s. King James, who published the King James Version of the Bible that we use today, he was a Hebrew Israelite from the tribe of Judah. He was king over Scotland from 1567 to 1625. Queen Philippa, who was the first black queen of England, was a Hebrew Moor, and she reigned as queen over England from 1327 to 1350. And there were hundreds more of Hebrew kings and queens in Europe during the Middle Ages, but you won't learn about any of this from any of America's historical resources because our oppressors don't want us to know that we have royalty in our DNA. This is why all modern works of European civilization purposely distort the identity of the Hebrew Israelites. Caucus America and the powers that be want to wipe out the fact that black people conquered Caucus people and brought about a level of civilization that ultimately awakened Europe from its dark ages and ushered in its Renaissance. As a result of our history being taught to us from the penmanship of our oppressors, we have been led to believe many lies in regards to the enslavement of our ancestors here in America. For instance, it is often taught to us that slavery started in the year of 1619, but that is not true. 1619 was the year that slavery became legal in North America, but Caucus people have been illegally enslaving Hebrews in the Caribbean islands and Central and South America since the 15th century. The first slave ships that came from West Africa went directly to the West Indies, what we now call the Caribbean islands. That is where slavery started, under the authority of the Roman Catholic Church and funded by the Ashkenazi and Khazarian Jews. Many Caucasus explorers were commissioned to go explore these new lands and conquer them so that they could send their Hebrew slaves there to build them a new world. Christopher Columbus, whom the public school system falsely credits as discovering America, was the first Caucasian to enslave black people in the Caribbean West Indies. In the late 14th century, he was funded by Queen Isabella of the Roman Catholic Church to sail from Spain to the island in which he thought he was going to India. He was searching for gold and resources from the native inhabitants. Columbus had heard that the islands of India were the lands of endless gold, and he wanted to sail there to steal all of their resources and forcefully convert the natives to Christianity so that the Roman Catholic Church could control the land. In 1492, Columbus and his shipmate, Pedro el Negrito, who Columbus called Peter, the little N-word, first arrived to the west on the islands of modern-day Dominican Republic and Haiti. Peter was a high commander of the expedition because he was a Hebrew Moor and spoke Spanish, Latin, and Hebrew. He served as a translator for Columbus on many of his journeys. When Peter stepped foot on the island of Hispaniola, he was greeted by a black king who greeted him in a dialect of Aramaic, the language primarily spoken by the Hebrews in Africa. According to Columbus' journals and letters, the first people he encountered when he stepped off the ship in the West Indies was a band of black Arawak Native Americans. Columbus, who thought that he had landed in India, called them Indians because they were black in skin color like the people living in South India, where he thought he was. This is how the Native Americans got the name Indians. So the real Native Americans were black, and they had been living in the Caribbean and the Americas thousands of years before Christopher Columbus ever stepped foot there. There's not enough evidence to prove that these were actually Hebrew Israelites, but at least we do know that they were black. As it appears today, the Native Americans have been whited out and seem to have more in common with the Hamites, or who we call today the Africans. In regards to the Africans and the Native Americans, this can be covered in a separate video. There will be no discussions, or I will not be answering questions in regards to this topic in the comment section. One thing we know for sure is that all brown people inhabited these different lands. And prior to the fall of the Watchers, there were no pale-skinned people on Earth. We know for a fact that we can't link every brown-skinned person with being a Hebrew Israelite, since all people in the world were initially brown-skinned. But only the 12 tribes who came from Jacob were actually considered to be Hebrew Israelites. I can cover this in another video. It doesn't even make sense to label every dark-skinned person as a Hebrew Israelite, just as it doesn't make sense to call all dark-skinned people Africans. So just because someone is melanated doesn't mean that they're actually an Israelite. And scores of people want to argue that race doesn't matter, that skin color doesn't matter. But it does. The same people who argue this are the same people who worship white Jesus and changed his color from the brown-skinned person that he was in the Bible. Is it a coincidence that every nation of people know exactly who they are except for the so-called Negroes? And when we begin to look for our identity, it's a problem, and race doesn't matter. One of the main reasons that it matters is because we need to be able to identify who the chosen people are. Who are these chosen people, the Hebrew Israelites, in which the Most High is addressing throughout the whole Bible? You mean scores of people own a copy of our book and no one wants to know who the true Hebrew Israelites are? The Bible teaches us that the Gentiles must cleave to Yaakov for salvation. If this is in fact true, don't you want to know who the true Hebrew Israelites are? Yet your focus and main concern is that we are waking up to who we are as a people and gathering ourselves together. And all of you Bible scholars who continue to post Bible verses in my comment section, since you know so much about the scriptures, why don't you know about Deuteronomy 30, where it says the Hebrew Israelites would wake up to their true identity in the last days and return to their Father and keep His commandments? I challenge you to go ahead and post a comment explaining to me why Deuteronomy 30 says this. And after you explain what this means, also explain Deuteronomy chapter 28. All you seem to want to talk about is Jesus and how He came to save the whole world, knowing full well that the Bible does not contradict itself. You need to find out who the world is, because Yeshua said He came for the lost sheep of Israel. And since the Bible does not contradict itself, it doesn't sound like Yeshua came for the whole world to me. The only way that you can figure out what world Yahushua is talking about He came to save is if you read precept upon precept, because the Bible defines itself. Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 17 reads, "But Israel shall be saved in Yahuwah with an everlasting salvation. Ye shall not be ashamed nor confounded, world without end." I know that some of you heathens aren't going to get that because you don't want to get it. So I ask this question again. If your position as a Gentile is to cleave to the house of Jacob for salvation, how can you expect the Father to save you if you don't know who the children of Israel are or you hate them? Because your position is to cleave to the house of Yaakov. But I digress, because the doors of salvation is closing. The Most High have me doing these messages for my people and those who cleave to the house of Yaakov. Shalom.